Good evening, I'm Ethan Winowski and welcome to A Current Affair. On tonight's segment, we take a look back on the 2011 Qantas Dispute, which resulted in the grounding of their whole fleet nationally and internationally at one stage. We will also look at parties involved, why it happened, and issues leading up to and during the dispute, and propose how Australia could deal with industrial relation disputes in the future. The Qantas disputes occurred between mid-2011 and early 2012 and involved Qantas, Australia's international airline, and a number of trade unions. The trade unions involved were the Australian and International Pilots Association, representing pilots, the Australian Licensed Aircraft Engineers Association, representing engineers, and the Transport Workers Union, representing the ground staff. Many employees were unhappy with the working conditions and pay they were receiving and wanted these addressed through the enterprise bargaining negotiations. With Qantas not listening to them or consulting with them, they decided to strike and take other actions to show the company that they are serious about the claims and pressure them to follow up their needs. However, from the employer's perspective, they saw this as another pressure given their financial situation, which resulted in further losses with many flights delayed and cancelled, passengers affected, drop in share prices and damaged reputation, and a hefty $68 million cost to the business because of the strikes. All this resulted in Qantas taking action, deciding to lock out the company on October 31st, with no employees of the business allowed to work until dispute is sorted. This included all Qantas flights worldwide being grounded. While this was an intense measure, it was a legal one that followed all acts. It was also an effective act, with Fair Work Australia ending the dispute later that day. At this time, Qantas was suffering, having lost $200 million during the previous financial year. To improve their position, Qantas came up with a 5-year solution which was announced to the media on August 17, 2011, without consultation with their workforce. It involved forging the business into parts of Asia with the aim to return Qantas International profitability by increasing its market share. This included a new Asian premium airline, new Jetstar Japan line, and the cut of 1,000 jobs in Australia, including those of engineers, pilots, and cabin crew. Employees saw that as a disgraceful act and unnecessary loss of jobs, with unions also supporting these views, quoting it as one of the darkest days in the history of Qantas. The pilots were concerned about pay equity as the average Qantas pilot earns $187,000 per year, whereas their Jetstar counterparts are paid about 50% less to do the same job. The pilots, after not having their voice heard, decided to take action, announcing their situation on flights through the PA system for everyone to hear. Other employees who did not strike had an excessive workload and were intimidated, which is unethical for the employees and the business. Beyond the issues between the employer and employees, there are a number of other issues that arose as a result of the dispute. Firstly, passengers were affected most by the dispute as they were the ones who were in the middle of it. While employees were going on strikes and employers cancelling and delaying flights, the passengers were left in the crossfire. Some passengers had their flights cancelled or delayed, with approximately 68,000 passengers affected on the first day of the lockout. Those passengers who were affected were reimbursed of accommodation fees and refunded on their flights. Secondly, the economy was affected drastically. It affected the tourism industry as passengers could not leave or enter Australia, and with it being a long haul from other countries and the Australia dollar high at the time, it turned a lot of people off coming after the dispute. Along with this, not all passengers rebooked their trips after Qantas cancelled their flights. This means that there was a significant loss in the tourism industry as passengers and holiday goers were pulling out of their activities as it was too difficult to rebook and would cost them more in the long run. This also affected the tourism companies, with some having to cut shifts and jobs because of the dispute. It also affected the Qantas share price, which dropped from $1.89 mid-2011 to $1.48 by the start of 2012. The last effect of the dispute on the economy was the loss Qantas made, with $227 million less profit than the previous years, which can also be attributed to the move of customers away from Qantas due to a fall in reliability and reputation. This was dealt with by competitors of Qantas, such as Virgin Airlines, who offered discounted fares to those passengers and provided additional seats for those passengers affected, getting them where they needed to be. Throughout the dispute, Qantas were lawful in what they did and took significant yet needed actions to help the business. The delaying and cancelling of flights were measures needed to be taken by the business due to the situation, and the grounding of their whole fleet was the last action they took to show the employees and unions they have had enough. The employees were mainly lawful throughout the dispute. However, there were some acts that were seen as unlawful, such as pilots announcing their pay disputes with the company over the in-flight PA system to the passengers. This was making a scene and also making the problem bigger than it already was. Qantas suffered the most from the situation. They lost $194 million due to the actions taken by the unions, along with an extra $20 million a day during the lockout. The employees, on the other hand, had their voice heard and got a pay rise and better working conditions. The dispute was one of the largest industrial relations disputes in Australia's history. Despite the impact it had, no changes were made to the industrial relations laws. However, in order to prevent a similar situation occurring, changes are needed. An example is a law that gives a deadline as to when the dispute needs sorting. If this deadline is breached or dispute not solved quick enough, the government has the authority to step in and sort it out. This would make companies want to sort out their disputes quickly so government isn't involved and saves wastage of time and money that would be invested into solving a lengthy situation. To prevent the same situation occurring in the future, there needs to be formal and sensible connections made between the employers and employees. Instead of strikes and showing up late to work, which cripples and costs the business, employers need to talk to their respective unions, and then the unions go to the employers and discuss the issues on a regular basis. The employers can then negotiate business terms with the employees, with the unions being the messengers as and such. This is a much more logical way of handling the situation and will leave planes in the sky and customers happy. The Qantas dispute was one of the world's worst industrial relation disputes in Australia and affected many people worldwide. While this was a bad thing, it has taught employers and employees a lesson with regards to business and can hopefully be prevented from happening again in the future.